Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to Star Trek Prodigy, a RebingeIt podcast. My name is James.
And my name is Kim, and we're watching Star Trek Prodigy and talking about it here on the Talk Through Media network of podcasts. Hit it! Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 8, Time-Amok. This episode began streaming January 20th, 2022. Don't forget to subscribe to this pod wherever you get your podcasts at Star Trek Prodigy, a RebingeIt podcast. And we want to thank our many listeners for coming back to us after the mini break that Prodigy had.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and here we go again. So before we talk about this episode, a couple things from last week. First of all, we said that last week's episode was the first cold open, but we went back and watched. We thought we did this before, but somehow we missed it. But there was a cold open in episode 1.
Yeah, but that was a Star Wars episode, so I'm not going to count that as a Star Trek cold open.
Okay, I see. Also, I want to talk a little bit about something that you and I talked about off of the pod.
Yes.
But also we got an email about it from one of our listeners, so we thought we'd bring it up here in the beginning. So John wrote, last week's podcast was perfect, but I had one question linger. How did Nandi know about crystals on a planet with no alien contact? John, great question.
Okay.
I also asked this question. I feel like James wants to explain to us how this could happen.
Two possible methods. First one is somebody scanned from orbit and saw the crystals. 2, the crystals had been stolen in the past.
But it seemed so devastating to them when one crystal was missing.
Well, maybe this isn't the only settlement that has crystals, and other settlements were destroyed by people stealing the crystals.
I see. Okay. I think it's a legit question. I'm not sure that is the answer, but it makes sense. I can buy it.
Works for my headcanon.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's get down to this episode then.
Yes. So the name of this episode, another play on a Star Trek classic,
Yes.
Amok Time.
Yes, an original series episode was called Amok Time. And last week, of course, the episode was called First Con-Tact, which was one of the Star Trek movies.
Yeah, and then Kobayashi.
And yeah, Kobayashi. Kobayashi Maru was actually the title of the opener of the latest season of Star Trek Discovery.
I think the writers are having fun making the names for these episodes.
Yeah, and I'm struggling to see the connection, although I have to admit I don't really remember the original Amok Time episode. I asked you earlier which one that was.
It's where Spock experiences the Ponfar.
Well, that was our introduction in Star Trek lore to the Ponfar?
Yes.
Okay.
And oddly enough, Janeway had to deal with this in an episode of Voyager.
She did. I wonder if that's the link. Was it because there was a thin thread to Janeway? But, I mean, the title itself makes sense. That time is amok. That does make sense in this story.
It's a very tenuous one.
All right, well, let's get down to this episode. So just like before, we'll do a walkthrough to discuss what we think about today's plot. Then we'll read out feedback that we received, and we'll play a clip from our kid correspondent, Mahi. Mahi was extremely relieved that the Ferengi did not play a part in this episode. Me too. I'm totally with her.
You two are on the same page there.
Oh, 100%. All right, let's do it. We're not going to talk about the opening credits this week, shockingly. And the other thing this week is no cold open. We just went right into the theme song.
I now feel cheated.
Oh. So we start with the training officer's log from Janeway. That kind of gave me some, like, Voyager flashback chills.
Yeah.
And she tells us that the failure of their last mission is tearing the team apart.
All of this during an awesome flyby of the ship. This is such a great looking ship. I mean, it'll never steal my heart from the Defiant, though.
Oh, that tough little ship.
Little?
Since we had first contact last week, I guess it's okay if we have a first contact joke. So Janeway is giving the team a training exercise on the holodeck, and it's the fox, chicken, and a bag of grain problem. I always thought it was a bag of corn, but anyways, grain in this episode. And the point is that you have to get everything safely across the river, but you can only take one thing at a time in the boat. She's trying to get them to solve this as a team on the holodeck.
It's a team building exercise.
It is.
Rok-Tahk does seem to be enjoying holding onto the fox, probably because it's cute and furry.
Yeah, it's like a kitten.
Even if they've got a lot of teeth.
But the teeth can't bite the rocks, so
That's
she's
true.
just like,
So
this
she's
is a
okay.
great little pet. Yeah.
Dal has the chicken, which she initially starts off holding upside down, and Jankum is already bored and suggests eating the fox.
Well, sure, Jankum's always hungry.
Yeah.
And that is one way to protect the chicken, if you eat the fox. It wasn't described as the thing that you couldn't do.
We solved the problem by Jankum eating the fox.
Well, The chicken escapes from Dal's clutches and starts attacking him and chasing him around. And the fox sees the chicken and escapes from Rok-Tahk, and Murph is on the boat, which Jankum has ignored, and now it's floated out into the middle of the river.
Yeah, all the while Jankum is eating the grain and watching instead of helping.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, it's not going so well.
And Gwen shouts, "Security officer, stop the fox eating that feathered thing." Rok-Tahk is really freaked out by this. She doesn't want to be the security officer, and she says, "Stop calling me that."
I don't know. I think you'd want the giant rock-based strong life form that can beat its way out of a shuttle would be the perfect person to be the security officer.
Well, that's sort of the point here, is that's obviously what they've all thought.
Yeah.
That's the assumption, is that the toughest one should be the one who's the security officer, but that is the thing she does not want to do. Yeah. She doesn't want to be the tough guy.
Yeah, that seems to be the implication. They're sort of pushing her in that direction.
Right. So Janeway tells them that they need to work together and not let failure tear the crew apart in order to solve this riddle. But Dal says it's impossible. And he also says, "And we're not a crew."
Jankum tries to stop Dal from giving out too much information by saying, "You're making it sound like we're not Starfleet cadets. ...
Yeah, he actually says the dots. That was great.
And Dal now does the unbelievable and actually tells the truth. He tells Janeway he lied and that they were not Starfleet cadets and they just stole the ship. It's time to come clean. I did not see that coming.
No. And Janeway didn't either.
No. These recent events seem to be having an effect on Dal, if that's where he goes to. I think the exposure to Nandi maybe shook a lot of his foundations of how he lives his life.
Yeah, agreed. We were clearly already kind of impacting him before that episode, and then that one not only shook him up just in terms of what happened, but it shook the foundation.
Yeah.
That thing that he thought he could fall back on and believe in, it wasn't real.
Yeah. I mean, he just comes out straight out and just tells Janeway the truth.
Yeah, and she's pretty surprised. She's like, "You stole the ship?" The crew all files out of the holodeck kind of grumbling, but Zero remains, telling Janeway, "Perhaps I should explain." This seems logical, as Janeway deserves to know the story.
Yeah.
I can't tell if hologram Janeway is annoyed or confused. In the early episode, it seemed like she was clued in that maybe something was up with this team, but obviously she didn't know this.
I thought it looked like she was just confused.
Yeah, well, she's had a lot of confusing moments over the last couple of episodes.
Yeah.
Like she's dealing with memory loss.
Right.
She saw herself with Chakotay, which she couldn't remember, and now this. Though I question the word stole. Did they really steal this ship? It was abandoned. It was stuck in a rock. The diviner guy was going to take it and do something nefarious with it. I mean, really, they rescued the ship.
Well, I think it probably falls under legitimate salvage at this point.
Exactly.
It's not a military ship because I believe under the rules of the sea, military vessels always remain the property of the country which owned them. But Starfleet isn't a military organization, so...
No, and Janeway earlier pointed out that Starfleet was the exploration wing of the Federation. She didn't say the military.
So I'm going with legitimate salvage.
Okay. Also, did you see that in that holodeck program, at one point they showed Janeway's hands and it looked like she had blue fingernails. And then as soon as the holodeck closed, her fingernails were normal.
Huh.
I didn't know if that was a mistake or if on the holodeck she wants to have painted fingernails.
Oh, she can do what she wants. She's the training supervisor. We now cut to the Diviner's ship. Darth Dreadnought tells the Diviner another inquiry has come in, and on the view screen appears Nandi.
Ugh.
The Diviner immediately knows she's a Ferengi, so clearly he's quite experienced with the different races from the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah.
The ever-unpleasant Nandi gives him the coordinates of the ship, and Dreadnought tells him it's jumped too far, it would take them months to reach it. Ominously, the Diviner says, there are other ways to make our presence known. Nothing sinister there at all.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, I was wondering what he meant by that. I was thinking, maybe it's your comment from last week. Does he have local thugs?
Yeah, well, probably. Somebody like this.
Back on the Protostar, the vehicle replicator activates, and what looks like corrupted code flows down the screen, and we see robotic feet and legs start to be fabricated.
Scary. I have questions about this later, so I'm going to bring this up again.
Oh yeah, there's lots of questions right now.
So now we get more cool outside shots of the ship, we see Gwen looking out from a viewing deck. She tells Jankum that what they're looking at is a tachyon storm.
Which looks like a giant lightning storm in space.
Which we've heard before.
Yes.
On Star Trek.
Although tachyons, that sounds like time travel.
Yeah, definitely a Trek trigger word.
Yes.
Gwen says the storm might mess with the ship's gravity, the one thing holding them together, which makes Jankum panic. He runs away saying, gravity is the only thing keeping the proto-drive stable. He seems very concerned.
Yeah. In engineering, Janeway asks Jankum what's going on. She tells him cadets or not, they're still her crew and she's programmed to help.
Aw.
The Protostar appears to be powering up and Jankum says, that's not good. There is a huge energy discharge from the Protostar core and a purple wave passes over everyone. Janeway is briefly split into 5 different parts before all of them come back together as one Janeway.
It was a great effect. Yeah. I really liked it, and it did sort of a callback to Worf and Parallels when you see a bunch of Worfs. In season 7 of TNG, one of the best episodes of all time of all Star Trek. And so, I had a little bit of a flashback there. Janeway pulls up sensors, asking if anyone else felt that, but the computer reports there are no other life forms besides Jankum on board, and she's super confused. And Jankum says, oh no, core breach. And we learn that a gravity shell is keeping the Protostar from exploding. And he says he's got 10 minutes to fix it. And then in 1 second, we see from the outside that the Protostar explodes.
Yes.
And then Janeway appears to be zapped back to the bridge of a non-exploded Protostar.
Yeah. Janeway finds only one life form aboard again, and this time it's Rok-Tahk. She's hiding under a blanket by her bunk. In the background, you can see the blanket and some other objects are all sort of just floating and moving slowly, like something's wrong.
Yeah, either gravity or time.
And I think the implication that we find is it's time. But it looks like it could be either at this point.
Well, they're certainly hinting it's gravity because the lack of gravity or the problem with gravity is what caused the Protostar to blow up.
Right.
But there's also this time element.
Yeah. They go to the engine room and we get some exposition that the tachyon storm did something strange. The crew are all still on board the ship, but moving through time at different speeds. Here with Rok-Tahk, time is moving very slowly. Janeway tells Rok-Tahk she only has 10 minutes, but because time is moving so slowly, she has a lot of time to fix the warp core breach. Rok, unfortunately, panics and tells the computer to make Janeway go away.
Ugh,
I feel bad for her. It's so clear that she's just a terrified kid and literally panics at this moment.
Yeah. Janeway now jumps to Zero, who's totally figured out what's going on. And I expect hologram Janeway's just happy to have a grown-up to talk to after that last experience.
Yeah. He's such a Vulcan.
And he's also somebody who's already working on the problem.
Yeah.
There's some exposition as to how they're all stuck in oscillating time in different phases of this, as Janeway says, some kind of temporal anomaly, alternating time running faster or slower. Jankum's time was running fast, Rok-Tahk's really slow, and Zero's a little bit faster, apparently, than Rok-Tahk.
Yeah.
Zero doesn't have enough time to build a warp matrix, but is designing a schematic for Janeway to pass on to the next person. Also, Zero is typing away on a keyboard with their giant hands and says something about wishing that they had better control of their hands. Well, you have an opportunity to build better hands from here.
Yeah, and you have like a vehicle replicator that could like make a complete new suit for him.
Yeah.
Did you notice the tone of the warp core breach warning was different than in Jankum's time stream? It was a little bit longer in duration and slower. So they were showing how time was moving differently.
I really didn't notice it the first time through, but the second time through, yes. Well, Zero runs out of time, and we get this really cool space flyby of the characters as this version of the Protostar explodes, and Janeway flips to the next temporal phase. Or, I don't know if that's the right word. It's a word I just made up.
It's a good Star Trek
word. It sounds like a Star Trek word. Yeah. Some kind of temporal wave.
Oh, perfect. Well, after the great flyby, Janeway drops into this new phase and finds, unfortunately, it's Murph. I'm pretty sure he's not going to be able to do anything with those schematics, except probably eat them if she prints them out.
He, throws up some piece of equipment that he ate, and then he laughs. I don't know. Murph is kind of growing on me. That was funny.
Hey, seeing as how he could survive photon grenades, maybe he could eat the Protostar and contain the blast.
But then the Protostar would be gone.
That's true, yeah. That wouldn't be so much fun.
No.
She now jumps to Dal, who is playing a game and being a completely sulky jerk. So we see the old Dal making a reappearance.
It's brief.
When he discovers the rest of the crew is missing, he finally starts to act a little more grown up. He attempts to use the vehicle replicator to make the warp matrix, but it's disabled with a fatal error. He says, somebody has uploaded a giant file and it's all out of whack. Dal starts to panic a little and says he can't do it. He'll only screw it up. I think the bravado that we see from Dal is actually hiding some real self-esteem issues.
That's definitely true. Janeway now tells him about the Tom Hanks movie Apollo 13, where the crew didn't give up and they used spare parts that they had on board in order to solve their problem.
I think if we had more time, she could show him that actual movie, because it was a really good movie. But she doesn't address the fact that they also had like a really focused ground crew helping them. Probably not best to tell Dal about that part of the story.
No, she's trying to kick him into gear.
Yeah.
She does say, though, that he has something that they had, and that's ingenuity.
Yeah.
And this helps to motivate him. We've seen this ability in him before. He thinks really creatively.
Right.
And now just the fact that he said, oh, let's go and use the vehicle replicator, that was very smart, right? Creative thinking.
It did seem to impress Janeway.
It did. Well, now we have a montage of Dal actually working hard trying to build this thing with Janeway guiding him on how to build the Matrix.
Oh, I guess she was the equivalent of the ground crew helping. Okay.
I guess she was. He gets it fabricated and he rushes to connect it, but it's missing one part, a dilithium coupler. And he's a little despondent, saying, I told you I'd mess this up.
Oh, I felt bad for him.
Oh, I know. And she tells him he didn't mess up. He added a piece to the puzzle. Yeah. And the look on her face is priceless, too. She holds out her hand and he touchingly holds it and asks, what happens next? And Janeway says, we trust each other. And the ship explodes. Ugh, that was heartbreaking.
Yes, that was a tough scene. It was also a good scene for Dal because it's building trust with Janeway.
That's true. And he also got some good feedback from her.
Yeah.
She did a really good job of coaching him in this entire scene. And really of all of the crew across everybody. She struggled maybe a bit with the child, but eventually that child came around.
Well, as we will see. We now go to the vehicle replicator and we see some kind of creature is being replicated. All this while Gwyn is searching for a dilithium coupler. Janeway tells her, hurry, you only have, and Gwyn cuts her off saying, don't tell me, it never helps.
Never tell me the odds.
In the cargo bay, the replicators are finished and we see what it's made. Dreadnought.
Naked Dreadnought.
Or at least another Dreadnought. I think your comment, Kim, last week about, hey, they could be an army of them, seems pretty on the nose.
I mean, of course, it's just going to be an army of these horrible things.
Yes, I don't think this is good.
No. Janeway sees it on the monitor and asks, what is that? And Gwen says, a present from my father. And Janeway replies, can we return it?
Okay, line of the week.
Line of the week, and it wasn't even Jankum.
Yes. I think it so fits the character of Janeway.
Very good.
It really makes me want to watch Voyager again.
So now Naked Dreadnought, I mean, he looks so weird without his scary cloak on. He comes onto the bridge and Janeway says, I've seen you before. You attacked my former crew. He knows who she is, and when she says, you erased my memory, he replies with close, but not quite. What does that mean?
Here's my theories.
All right.
He could be referring to the fact that maybe it was the diviner who did actually all the work.
That's true. Could have been the diviner.
The other option is there's a lot more dreadnoughts.
Yeah, because is this really Dreadnought? I imagine the other Dreadnought is still on the other ship.
Right.
So this is like Dreadnought 75, something.
Yeah, they just replicated a new one, uploaded the code, and this Dreadnought could say, oh yeah, the Dreadnought that erased you was Dreadnought 47.
Exactly, it was just some other one.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the 47 reference.
Thank you. While Dreadnought is working on a console, Gwyn takes this opportunity to attack him with her arm sword, but it has zero effect on him.
Yeah.
He knocks her away twice and then gives the authorization code to erase the Janeway hologram. And he uses Chakotay's access code to do it.
I was really upset by this moment in the show, not just because he deleted Janeway and she disappeared, but also there was a hint of Chakotay's voice when he spoke and gave that code, and the whole thing was super creepy.
Yes, I went back and listened to that after you told me, and it's like a slightly digitized version of Chakotay's voice. You can recognize it as him.
Yes, which I have to say brings up a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah.
But we'll talk about that later.
Gwyn tells him that the core is breached, and he immediately goes to a panel and pulls out the exact correct size dilithium coupler.
Do you think maybe he's had to build this thing before, and that's why he knew where it was?
I assume he has detailed schematics in memory of the entire ship.
Oh, yeah. So he could just access it. Okay.
Yeah. Gwyn asks him if his plan is to get rid of her and then take the ship. He replies that this is against his master's wishes, but he cannot see what I know to be true. You are his greatest mistake.
Oh, so mean.
I feel that Gwyn should have made a rude response to this, but kid show.
Yes. It did warrant some sarcasm.
Yeah.
It's a kid show. She could have said, I know you are, but what am I?
Oh, there you go. That would have worked. Now, by his master, does he mean the real Dreadnought or the diviner?
I assume the diviner.
Calmly, Dreadnought walks into the engine room and attaches the warp device. Watching on a view screen, Gwyn gets the idea to vent the engine room, saying,
Smart.
"Who's your master now?" Again, I think she could have spiced that up a little.
No, that's pretty good.
Dreadnought tries to hold on, but is vented out into space. You know, this is the second time he's been unceremoniously dumped off the back of the ship.
Oh, did that happen in the first episode?
Yes.
Well, unfortunately, the warp matrix also comes detached and is vented too. Terrible idea, Gwen.
Oh, that was somewhat frustrating.
Yes. The warp core breach starts again, and Gwen walks to the captain's chair and calmly says, "Computer, record a captain's log."
Finally, somebody recognizes her as the captain.
And then we cut to Rok-Tahk, who's in the mess hall eating that brown stuff, I think, that's the goop from the prison asteroid.
Yeah, Kim and I had a big debate about whether this was ice cream or the prison planet goop.
Yeah. And then they show her trying to bring back Janeway, but the computer tells her that program has been terminated. And she seems very sad. And also, she's not cleaning up after herself because there are hundreds of bowls around. I imagine we're supposed to be able to guess how much time she's been spending there based on the amount of plates and bowls that are around.
Yeah, and she's not cleaned up.
No.
Do you want space rats? This is how you get space rats.
Or voles. This is how you get Cardassian voles.
Oh.
Or ants.
Space ants.
Space ants would be very bad.
Oh, yeah.
Now we get a bit of a montage about how she's spending time alone. Like she's still sleeping in her bunk. And she's all curled up with a toy Murph that she made, which is super cute and very sad.
Yeah.
And she says goodnight to the other crew members who are no longer there, but all their stuff is still surrounding each of their bunks. And she goes to the holodeck and she's watching that training exercise with the chicken and the fox sort of from the distance.
Yeah.
She says something interesting, which is, should have listened to Zero. And you think, okay, maybe she's paying attention or she's starting to think about things.
Right.
And then there's a beep and she discovers a message is coming in from Gwen, where Gwen says that she understands that they pushed Rok-Tahk too hard. They pushed her to be something that she didn't want to be. And Gwen can really relate to that because she's been pushed to be something she didn't want to be her whole life. And she's being really empathetic in her message. And Rok touches the screen like she really feels that.
Yes.
But Gwen tells her that Rok really needs to try and help from here.
And Gwen explains how she's attached files of how to build the warp matrix. But Rok still believes she can't do it.
Yep.
And we see an outside shot of the ship with Rok saying, I can't. And then the first bars of the classic Star Trek theme start to play. And then we cut to Rok-Tahk standing in the central hub of the ship with the Starfleet logo on the floor. This was awesome.
And we know everything's going to be okay.
Using the theme right there.
Oh.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
Yes.
Absolutely excellent. Completely at the most moving moment. And you needed something to turn it, and that turned it. Oh, loved it.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know how many times you and I watched that.
Yes.
Made us very happy.
Well, now Rok-Tahk is working on a panel in the mess, and she's still not cleared up those bowls.
It's a real big mess in the mess.
And then hologram Janeway reappears.
Woohoo!
Rok-Tahk tells her that the memory buffer never got overwritten, so she rebuilt the program after only 276 tries. We've all dealt with programs like that, haven't we?
At least 276.
Rok-Tahk tells her she wishes she could hug Janeway.
Why can't she hug Janeway?
I know we have corporeal holograms, so she could go to the holodeck and hug her there.
We just had this discussion on Rebinge Deep Space Nine because Quark turns himself into a hologram or creates a hologram out of himself to fill his wait staff.
Yes.
And I said, I don't understand. He's a hologram. How can he carry around cups and trays?
He was carrying trays and
you're
drinks.
like, no, they can carry, holograms can carry stuff. And I said, sure, on the holodeck because those things are holograms. But you're like, no, they can carry items. We certainly saw that on Voyager.
Yep.
Even if for no other reason, the doctor on Voyager, even before he had his mobile emitter,
yes,
he could pick up hyposprays.
Carry out medical procedures.
Right, pick up other instruments. So why can't she be corporeal?
Well, certainly enough that you could give her a hug.
Yeah, I don't get this. Moving on.
Yeah.
We now get a little more humor as Janeway asks, if you could build a warp matrix, why did you need me? and we see behind Rok-Tahk a fully built warp matrix, which, by the way, looks a lot better than the one that Dal built.
Yeah, Rok-Tahk's craftsmanship seems a little bit higher.
Yeah, and Rok-Tahk very innocently says, "No one told me where it goes."
Aww.
I would think maybe she could have figured it out after all the other stuff that she did, but she wanted Janeway back.
I think, yeah. Rok-Tahk, still suffering from some self-doubt despite having done all these things, is worried that it won't work. But Janeway reassures her, and she plugs it in. And then along with some very dramatic music, the purple wave flows backwards into the Protostar. Everyone reappears. The crew is now gathered on the bridge, and Gwyn says, "I'm alive." And Jankum replies, "I distinctly remember not being alive." And Zero asks, how is this possible?
Well, Janeway and Rok-Tahk walk onto the bridge at this moment, and Janeway says, "She's how," nodding at Rok-Tahk. And Rok-Tahk says, "We need to talk about my job title." And there's a group hug, and Murph even drops in from wherever he was hiding on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Everyone seems happy, which is a real change from earlier in the episode. Some team bonding going on.
Yeah, a little bit of a 180 from where they were at the start. Now, has everybody forgotten about Dreadnought being replicated down on the cargo deck?
I guess maybe Gwen thought since she vented him, he was gone. And you would think maybe Janeway, though, would speak up because he was still alive when she got fried.
Guys, there's an evil robot on the cargo deck.
Yeah.
Here's a question, though. What happened to that Dreadnought that was replicated in that timeline? He got blown out the back of the ship and then exploded. Is there another Dreadnought just floating out in space somewhere?
I think so.
Yeah.
He's just floating around. He's going to land on something at some point. Maybe he'll land on the Ferengi ship.
Oh, I wonder if you'll find the Sword of Kahless floating around out there.
Oh.
That was in the Gamma Quadrant.
That's good.
Just saying.
Just saying. Well, Gwen breaks away from the group hug and asks Janeway how long Rok-Tahk was alone. Janeway says, "Too long." Nice to see some empathy from Gwen here.
Yeah, I like how they're developing Gwen.
Me too. They're so vague in this episode, though, about a lot of things. They're vague about how long she was alone.
Yeah.
There's some point where Dal asks Janeway how long she has, and she says, like, T-minus not long or something. You could give some numbers.
Yeah. It's not important for the story, though.
Apparently not. Well, Rok-Tahk tells them she couldn't have done it without all of them. She just followed the instructions that they gave her, and she taught herself quantum science and computer engineering and so much math. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Janeway looks at them and says, "You may not think you're a crew, but you sure look like one."
And in the cargo bay, we see the vehicle replicator has actually malfunctioned, and only parts of Dreadnought have been replicated. A broken Dreadnought head with just one eye powers up and glows red.
The end. So what did the one red eye remind you of?
Oh, that was totally Terminator, the original.
That was totally Terminator.
Where it's crawling towards Sarah Connor.
But it was some horror movie where it's just an arm and part of a body pulling itself along. That's what I was envisioning.
Oh, right. That's the next thing the crew have got to look forward to.
Well, that was a dramatic ending, and I think I read that the next 2 episodes are a 2-parter.
Oh.
As we go into the end of season 1.
Excellent.
Okay, let's talk about what stood out in the episode.
Well, they really need to check on the vehicle replicator.
Yeah.
They need to go down there and check it out.
Yeah, they need to see what's there and, find the partial Dreadnought. But they also need to get some security protocols going around that thing. You can't have people from all over the place just beaming stuff to your to your 3D printer and having it print up and take over the ship.
Yeah, you've got to secure those systems. Obviously, the Diviner has some way of hacking into the computers on the ship.
You need to make it so there's multi-factor authentication. So the person from the outside sends something in, but somebody on the inside has to press a button that says approve. Come on, people.
Yeah.
One thing that stood out to me was that Janeway didn't ask Gwen about Dreadnought. In the previous episode, she saw that little tiny sliver of the Dreadnought and was like, "Who are you?" And then when she saw him here, she was like, "Who is that?" And Gwen knew who it was because Gwen said, "Oh, it's a gift from my father." So maybe there's another conversation to come. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think she'd want to find out exactly who that is and as much information as Gwyn has.
Yes.
If anything, just to be able to provide advice how to potentially neutralize him.
Right. The other security protocol they need to put in is they need to remove Chakotay's access codes or all the access codes that can just delete Janeway.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like her life is precarious. We got to protect the hologram.
Yeah. Well, that leads on to, so how did Dreadnought get those access codes? That's not something you would see Chakotay giving up easily.
No, but I always found it funny in Star Trek when the person would say their access code out loud.
Yeah.
So one of the Dreadnoks may have just heard him say it.
Yeah, is it like standing in front of an ATM and going, 1, 2?
Exactly. And also he could easily record his voice because he's just a computer.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was low security.
Right.
But there's potentially something else there. Like maybe that Chakotay on that ship was actually a robot and it wasn't Chakotay.
Oh, that's a really good one. Oh, I like that.
Somebody brought that up in our feedback section too, but definitely something that crossed my mind.
So when it comes to the crew, now both Rok-Tahk and Gwen are better trained and more qualified to be the captain of the ship than Dal. I think they need to have a team chat about that.
Maybe from a technical standpoint, yes, but from a leadership standpoint, Dal is the one making the most strides. He's the one seeing that he's not more important than the team, that he needs to listen to his team, that he needs to be honest. He's learned all these really important leadership lessons. So I guess you could have a team discussion about it. But they need a grown-up running the ship. There's no doubt about that. But he's going to fail if you start comparing the technical knowledge. Yeah. Well, he's going to come in fourth. The only person he's ahead of is Murph.
That's pretty funny.
Oh, another thing that stood out to me is, again, not enough Jankum. I really need the Jankum humor. Janeway had the best lines in this episode, but I guess because she was in each of the stories and Jankum blew up really fast.
Yeah, they got rid of Jankum too quick.
I need some more humor from Jankum.
So does this now mean that Rok-Tahk should be the chief engineer on the ship?
That's what I took from it, that now she's Miles O'Brien or Geordi or whomever. But if she could teach herself all of those scientific disciplines and math, I would make her my engineer.
I'll go with that.
Or even first officer, but probably engineer. They did a thing in this episode that I've loved in pretty much every version of Star Trek, which is they cut the crew off from each other, but they all have to work together to solve their local problem in order to solve the bigger problem. Love that. Love to see it here.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic Star Trek theme. It's been used so many times before, and if you get it right, it just rocks.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing that stood out for me in this episode, I think, is the animation and the color. The flybys of the ship was just beautiful. The flyby where Janeway is on that temporal wave and the other characters are like flying underneath her.
Oh, man, I loved that.
That was great. The other thing was the hug scene at the end where the colors were just so vibrant and just popped.
Yep.
I thought it stood out really well in terms of the visuals and how the color worked so well in that scene.
I totally agree. It was really striking at the end. But those character flybys, I don't know, it was just super cool.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that exactly like that in a non-animated show, and they did it beautifully here. I did have some questions about the Rok-Tahk time thing. Yeah. It seemed like when she was dropping things or throwing them behind her, they were moving.
Yeah.
And I would think if she was really in that slow of time where minutes would become days or weeks or months, when she dropped things, I'm not sure those things would move.
Right.
I don't think we would see them. It just seems like they would move a lot slower, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it should be like hundreds.
Yeah, and wouldn't everything be slower? Wouldn't food be replicated slower? And the playback on the holodeck be slower? And wouldn't even the doors opening be slow? So it could take her, days to get through a door?
We'll wave our writing hands at that one.
Okay. I also thought it was funny that we just flew into that storm. Gwen's like, oh, there's a tachyon storm. It's going to mess up our gravity. Better just fly right into it and see what happens. Come on.
Could you not go around it? That seemed a little bit dangerous. So I don't know if it's just me, but did you think the warp matrix looked like one of those Spotbot portable vacuums?
Oh, absolutely.
That's totally what triggered in my head.
Even the fancy one that Rok-Tahk did looked like a Spotbot.
One of the animators was having to clean up after their cat or dog and designed it on that.
Yeah, having two cats, we're very familiar with that sort of technology.
Yes.
You talked about the colors and the animation in this episode being great. Uh-huh. The thing that moved me even more than that was the music. The music was so great in this episode. Yes. They used it in these really effective spots. And
Right.
yes, they stuck in the little Star Trek things, which we will love for the rest of our lives. We're going to love when anybody does that and they do it effectively. But
Yeah.
even they used their own theme song, in some of the really dramatic parts.
Yeah.
They used other music that was not from the theme when things were really dramatic and big things were happening. And it was just so beautifully done.
Yeah. In the first episode, they really seem to have a great handle on how to use music.
Yeah.
I might not have noticed it in previous ones, but this is the first one in a while that I've really noticed it. They've worked on the music a lot to tie in with the action and what's happening.
Yeah, agreed. The last thing that I added here to our notes about what stood out is I'm a little confused about how they managed to beam Dreadnought, or the plans for Dreadnought, to the ship, because Nandi gave them the coordinates, or she said, I'll send over the coordinates, but she only knew where they were at one point. They had clearly moved on, unless I guess she could have been following them, as she did have a cloak.
True.
But that was a little hand wavy that they managed to pinpoint right where that ship was and beam through the firewall the plans for this Terminator.
Yeah, that raises the question of how close do they need to be to communicate with the ship, or do they need to, whatever communication method they have of putting this onto the ship?
Yeah.
Do they need to have a rough idea of where it is?
Yeah, because I question even being able to have direct communication from that far away.
That's also a very good point.
And then to be able to do this, it seemed a little hand wavy.
Yeah, because you'd think from that distance, Janeway in Voyager could have just contacted Starfleet and said, hey, we're stuck out here.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Would have been nice if they could have just called home. No problem.
Right. Well, maybe the Diviner has some technology we are not privy to.
Oh, I think he does, if he's the one responsible for the Protostar. So let's move on to character development and talk about what we learned in this episode. I think it's clear that this is the episode of Rok-Tahk and Rok-Tahk's development.
Very much so. So Rok-Tahk was basically pigeonholed into this security role because she's a giant rock monster.
Right.
She's also filled with self-doubt initially, but ultimately she was able to learn the necessary skills and overcome her self-doubt. Although even then she still needed that little reassurance from Janeway.
Yeah, when Janeway said she was proud of her, even when she thought she might fail at the end.
Yeah.
Oy.
I mean, ultimately, she was the one who saved the ship from starting from a point where she was just a panicky kid who was terrified.
Absolutely. What if Murph had ended up in the slow-moving one? They would have all been dead.
They would have all been dead, yeah. Unless we follow my theory of Murph could have actually eaten the Protostar and just absorbed the energy.
Oh, yeah. That's a different cartoon. I hope that in all that time, she was actually interacting with her friends on the holodeck and not just sitting off in the corner and watching them for the months or years or however long she was there.
Oh.
And not just, being totally isolated.
Oh, that's interesting. I saw it as her just watching. I didn't think she interacted.
Well, I hope over time she learned to. Otherwise, she's just stuck in isolation. We don't know. Again, they were so vague about the time. How long do you think it took? I mean, if she was going to go to school and learn these things, it would be years. But was she able to do this in months?
I honestly don't know. I mean, maybe part of this story is that Rok-Tahk is a great deal smarter and a lot more adaptable than we've been led to believe. So she was able to learn these things, but in a matter of months. So maybe this was 6 months, 8 months, something like that.
Not like 20 years or something.
This was extended time, but it wasn't years that she was there.
I hope it wasn't years, because I feel like that would be torture to the one who really wanted a family and friends. To be isolated for that long. That would be pretty awful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's what I'm sticking with.
Okay. I can't help myself. I always worry about what negative impact something could have on someone. And I worry that isolation could have a negative impact on her. So, of course, I'm going to be concerned about that and bring that up. But even Dal continues to grow. He's still owning up to his lies and his mistakes. So if we thought maybe that was just going to be a one episode thing, it's not.
Yeah.
He's still doing it. He had the idea to use the vehicle replicator, which Janeway was like, great idea, but it was corrupted by the upload from the wrong timeline or whatever happened there. But he still continues to show creative problem solving.
Yeah, very much so. I was actually surprised that Dal was the one to admit that they'd taken the ship and that they weren't Starfleet cadets.
Right.
That was a real change of character. And the very touching moment with Janeway where she said to him, trust him.
Yep.
I see that as having a big effect of he trusted her and they got out of that situation.
Yep. That was a big deal.
So that points to Janeway being someone who you can trust. Because he's not really, even up until this point, he's not really trusted her.
Yeah, he's been a little suspicious, a little standoffish. There was also that touching moment between Gwen and Rok-Tahk, and with all of them, I guess, at the end.
Yeah.
So there was just so much heart in this episode. And they're really building on the team is coming more together as a team, but also as friends and as a family. And I like the fact that Janeway's becoming part of this.
Right.
It really sort of started when she realized that her memory had been erased. Now she's just a part of this. She's broken in her own way and, still trying to find out what is it that she's forgotten. And she's learned that this crew, that they are refugees. She's learned the truth now. And she protected them and she helped them and she's a part of it. And I don't know, just it's kind of a thing that only Star Trek can do, or at least has done to this point, is they take this character that used to exist, they turn it into a different version of themselves, like a robot version of themselves, but they give that character all the heart. And it's just super cool. And I love to see it. So anything we want to say about the ship this week?
Yes, I'm going to bring up two things. One, do not fly the ship into anything that will cause gravitational anomalies.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that.
Very bad for the Protostar core. And the next thing is Starfleet needs to standardize on a single size of dilithium coupler.
Or just have, small, medium, large. So you at least know what you're dealing with.
Oh, actually have a rack with like dilithium couplers.
Yeah, exactly.
Small, medium. We've only got 3 sizes. That's it. Standardization, people.
All right, let's move to how this works as a kid's show and hear from our 6-year-old correspondent, Mahi.
I thought it was a very good episode. Dal told Captain Janeway the truth about them not being Starfleet cadets. Also, the team figured out a way to fix the engine problem. Rok-Tahk did a great job and got lots of hugs, too.
How has Dal changed since the beginning of the show?
Dal is now a kinder captain who listens to his crew before making the decisions. He is now honest and a better captain. He is less selfish and trusts his crew.
What was the meaning of the chicken riddle?
Captain Janeway wanted to help the crew to trust each other and work together. After the first contact mission, the crew was nervous, lost their confidence, and were having a hard time trusting and working together.
Did you solve the puzzle? And if you did, how?
Although in the beginning I was not sure how to solve it, when Zero mentioned that we could take one across the river, but it did not mean that we could not bring one back, I was able to solve it. First, take the chicken across the river, having the fox with the bag of grains. Next, take the bag of grains and bring the chicken back. Then, take the fox across. Last, take the chicken across again. Done.
What did you learn in this episode?
I learned that if you believe in yourself and focus and learn, you can do anything. Nothing can stop you. Rok-Tahk learned lots of math, physics, and engineering to help fix the whole engine problem and save the ship and the crew.
What do you think will happen next?
I think the Diviner's machine will be back to attack the Protostar as it is not fully destroyed. I feel confident that the crew will figure out a way to defeat the Diviner with Captain Janeway's help.
Thank you, Mahi.
You're welcome.
That Rok-Tahk, she's a big hugger.
Yeah, she is. And at least she got some hugs here.
Yes, and they all seem very pleased to see her.
Well, they're all happy to be alive.
Who wouldn't? Not being one to argue with a 6-year-old, but I think realistically, you can't necessarily do all the things you want to do, no matter how hard you work at them.
Yeah, trying super hard doesn't mean you can do absolutely anything.
Yeah.
But I do think it's very important to figure out what it is that you want to do and try your absolute hardest at it. And one of the things in this episode was that Rok-Tahk didn't really know what she wanted to do, and she certainly thought she couldn't do anything.
Right.
When she was sort of forced into learning about engineering, she discovered she was miraculously great at it. And so then she could become even better.
Right. She seemed paralyzed by the fear that she couldn't do it. having never actually tried it.
Yeah, to me, that's always the key.
Yeah, I think that's really the message of this.
Yeah, you absolutely have to try. That's really what I felt when it went into that mode with her standing on the Starfleet logo and they were playing that music and she was saying, I can't, I can't. It was like, how do you know? You didn't even take a shot at it.
Yeah.
And then, it took her 276 tries to rescue Janeway, but guess what? She did it.
Yeah, that's just normal computer programming.
Well, hard to deny.
The first few beta releases did never actually really work.
Well, thank you, Mahi. Very glad that you enjoyed this episode. Happy there were no Ferengi in it to bother you or me. So I thought that was good. And I'm also glad you had the opportunity to solve the puzzle. So let's move on to our other feedback, starting with Jeff X-Force11.
Hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff X-Force11 leaving my feedback about Prodigy Time-Amok. I like this episode so much. I like that we got this separated along separate timelines episode, and I really enjoyed that Rok-Tahk really stepped up and made things happen. And it is interesting that our enemies can beam themselves, or at least the schematics, across vast distances to be put in the computer. I think we really need to put in some security protocols so this doesn't happen and so that Janeway doesn't get erased in the future. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force is out.
Got to agree with Jeff. They need those protocols to stop it being erased.
Yes, and also the security to just let people beam evil robots on board. I mean, come on. We've covered that, and it's obviously got to Jeff, too.
In agreement.
Okay, let's go to our written feedback.
This one comes from John, who is one of our Deep Space Nine listeners. Great episode. Although we are divided by time, we can work together.
Yeah.
Can't ask much more than that. We got some answers, and of course, more questions. Tachyons mess with time. We know this. Rok-Tahk doesn't know her capabilities and potential. Jankum is funny and good with his hands. Zero is practical and down to business. Murph is ... Murph.
What's funny, though, is that Jankum was the one who said ... in this episode.
Yeah. Nice use of it there.
Yep.
Dal is the Fresh Prince of the Gamma Quadrant. Absolutely in agreement. Gwyn almost goes Arya Stark on Dreadnought and manages to stop Dreadnought 2. That leaves what looks like Dreadnought 3 being built with the ability to call out Chakotay commands. And how long was Rok alone?
Yeah.
Perhaps living a lifetime a la Picard, TNG, The Inner Light.
Oh, gosh.
That would be really tragic if that was the case.
I hope she wasn't there that long. That's a really interesting reference.
That's a great episode, which I just rewatched, actually, very recently.
We got a couple of pieces of feedback on Facebook. The first one is from Aaron, and he said, Dreadnought seems like he's one of the crew. Maybe Chakotay.
Oh.
That's interesting. I had that fleeting thought as well. Why does that dude sound like Chakotay? Obviously, he could have just recorded him, but also, he could be Chakotay.
Oh, wow. That is something radical. Like the diviner took Chakotay's brain and put it in a robot.
Yeah.
Ooh. Little bit of evil cyborg action there.
Oh, that is what an evil guy twirling his mustache would do.
That's true.
Also on Facebook, Brian from Colorado wrote, I give this episode 10 out of 10 temporal anomalies. This was a fun episode to watch, and I could find no faults with it. In true Star Trek fashion, Tachyons are causing problems with time, and the crew has to work together to figure it out. The plot reminded me a little of Timescape, crossed with Cause and Effect, episodes from TNG, with a Prodigy twist. I can't wait to learn how long Rok was alone, seems like years, trying to study up on the science that would allow her to bring back her crew. They need to put that vehicle printer behind a firewall. Yes!
It seems everyone with a tech background is like, yeah, put it behind a firewall.
We're all like, you got to protect that printer. You can't have people beaming evil robots onto the ship.
Indeed.
And we're also all wondering, too, how long was Rok-Tahk alone? I mean, you could have given us a number.
That might have been upsetting, though.
Yeah, so Brian really liked it. That's cool.
Excellent.
That wraps up the feedback. Let's move on to the Star Trekkiness of this episode. We talked quite a bit about Star Trekky stuff already in the What Stood Out, because frequently the Star Trek things are what's going to stand out to us, but we did add a couple of things here. The first thing is the Star Trek music at that moment when Rok-Tahk got the courage to try.
Yes.
That was just a beautiful use of the Trek music.
Oh, perfect.
And just like the three notes. It was awesome.
Yeah, agreed. Well, next thing, building the team,
Very Trekkie.
finding stuff you're good at and doing it.
Yep. Not being forced into something that you're not good at.
Yep.
The time travel stuff. Come on.
Oh,
Very Trekkie.
with tachyons.
The tachyons, of course.
As soon as you hear tachyons or chronoton particles, you know you're in for fun.
And we made a few references earlier on about the some kind of, where Janeway says some kind of time anomaly, and then we said some
Yes.
kind of a few times. If you don't know that reference, you need to go onto YouTube and look up Star Trek some kind of and watch that video, because some kind of is a phrase that is used across the Treks to describe so many things. We find ourselves using it when we're describing Star Trek because you can't help it. It just becomes a part of the language.
Yes, it's so much part of the Star Trek story. There will be some kind of fill in whatever here.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, let's move on to ratings. What's your rating for this week?
Once again, I got to give it a 10. It hits every high mark. It lives up to exactly what I would expect from a Star Trek show.
Well, I'm going to shock you.
Really?
I give it a 10.
Really?
This is my favorite episode of the
Wow.
season. I absolutely loved it. And there's so many reasons. I feel like I've said all of them already.
Yeah.
10. Music. Story, how they broke it up into different parts and they all had to solve the problem. The teamwork, the big hugging at the end, the growth of everybody, including Janeway. Oh, loved it.
This one, I think, along with the first episode, really ties it for me of my favorite episodes of the season. This one probably just edges out the first because we've got to know the characters.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it makes it work that little bit better.
Oh, totally. Once you start to care about the characters, it means more. Absolutely.
And just visually a treat.
Okay, that wraps it up for season 1, episode 8. Come back next week for episode 9, which I believe is going to be the first part of a 2-parter. A little bit of Star Trek news came out this week. Star Trek Discovery was renewed for season 5.
Excellent.
We got a release date for Star Trek Picard season 2, which is March 3rd, which is going to cross over a bit with Discovery as that season ends. And then we also got a premiere date for Strange New Worlds, which is May 5th. That's super exciting.
I can't tell you how much I'm interested in that one.
And all of these shows, including Lower Decks, have been renewed for another season. So that's some really big Star Trek news this week.
I just loved Lower Decks. I'm so glad it's been renewed for another season.
I'm sure Boimler's happy too. All right, before we wrap up, I want to let you know that James and I can always be reached on RebingeIt@gmail.com and also on Twitter and Instagram @RebingeIt.
And don't forget, you can also listen to our Deep Space Nine podcast called Rebinge Deep Space Nine, available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube on the RebingeIt channel.
To contact us for Prodigy and even be a part of the show if you'd like, you can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts. You can also leave audio and written feedback at talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, or you can simply email us at rebingeit@gmail.com. So lots of ways to get to us if you want to be part of the podcast.
So hit those keys, people. Well, that's it for this week. Come back next week to hear the RebingeIt crew take on a new episode of Star Trek Prodigy.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.